No sé si esto se puede medir por porcentajes, pero más o menos cuántas posibilidades hay de que sigamos el plan que planeamos antes de nacer o que nos desviemos de él.
So when I talk in El Plan de tu Alma and El Don de tu Alma about a pre-birth plan, that does not mean that it's predetermined. It doesn't mean that there's just one path and it's set in stone. There are a few things that are like that. For example, if you plan before you're born to have a physical handicap which cannot be treated by medical science, which is something you would know, then short of a miracle, you will have that handicap. That kind of thing is set in stone. You choose your parents, they choose you. Once you're born, you can't change that. You have your parents. So that's set in stone. But there's a very small number of things that are like that. Most things, as you said in your question, are set up as possibilities or probabilities. So one of the mediums I work with, when she goes into people's pre-birth planning sessions, she reports that she sees something that looks like an incredibly vast and elaborate flow chart. Well, what is a flow chart? It's a series of decision points. If you do A, then B happens. If you do C, then D happens. And she sees this vast, intricate flow chart. It's so vast, it's almost beyond human comprehension. These are the so-called backup plans for a person's lifetime. So there's not just a plan A, there is, but there's also a plan B, C, D, E, and on and on and on. So many backup plans, it's beyond human comprehension. The backup plans are your soul taking into account your use of your free will. The soul knows that you have free will. The soul wants you to use your free will because that's how true learning occurs. If there were just one plan and everything were predetermined, we would be robots. It would be a mindless experience, and there would be no true growth or learning. So your soul accounts for your use of your free will by putting in place all of these backup plans, which are intended to ensure that one way or another, through one experience or another, you will eventually learn the things that you came here to learn. But the experiences themselves are set up as possibilities or probabilities. For example, we talked about Christina in the bomb explosion. I asked in the channeling session, what would have happened if the bomber had chosen not to plant the bomb, which he could have done? And the response was there would have been another very severe accident of some kind. It could have been almost anything. But there would have been some kind of severe accident that would have given Christina the opportunity to heal herself so that she could learn about healing in order to heal others. So if it doesn't happen one way, it will happen another way.
Mm-hmm. Si morimos, ¿no? Y después de morir nos damos cuenta que en la vida tal vez deberíamos haber hecho algunas cosas que no hicimos y sentimos como que algo, ¿no? Que no hicimos todo lo posible por nuestra completitud. ¿Esto cómo se resuelve? ¿Con una vida futura? ¿Hay tal vez incluso la posibilidad de vivir una vida alternativa en ese mismo tiempo que hemos dejado? ¿O de algún modo cómo se resuelve eso?
Well, let's take a simple example. One of the things I write about in El Plan de tu Alma is, and El Don de tu Alma as well, is karma, balancing karma. This is one of the main reasons why we plan difficult experiences for ourselves. A simple example would be, let's say that two people had a past life together in which one was ill and the other person was that person's caregiver. When those two people transition back into spirit and have their life review, as we all do, they may have a sense of unbalanced energy about that relationship. And they themselves decide if it's unbalanced. So they might feel complete within, in which case they can go on to do something else. Or they might say, we don't feel complete with that, let's balance the experience. If they want to balance it, the easiest way to do that is simply to trade places. So now the one who was ill plans the challenge of caregiving, and the one who was the caregiver plans the challenge of illness. What makes this so interesting and so difficult, I think, is that when those two people get back into body, they won't remember the pre-birth plan, just as most of us don't. So the challenge becomes one of how do we give and receive love unconditionally in these very difficult circumstances of self-created amnesia. And when I talk about giving love unconditionally, you know, the flow of love in the world is really a big circle. If you cut the circle in half, half of it is giving love to people. We all try to do this. We all believe this is a good thing to do. But the other half of that circle is receiving love. If you don't allow others to give love to you, you're actually blocking the flow of love in the world just as much as if you don't give love to other people. And this, I think, is particularly important for a caregiver situation because, in my view, it's incumbent upon the one who is ill to receive love from the caregiver. So, to answer your question, the people who were the ill person and the caregiver in the past life, they may go on to do something completely different, or they might come back and decide to trade places. And also there are, as I understand it, parallel personalities in parallel dimensions. For example, in El Donde tu Alma, there's a chapter about a woman who plans prior to birth to have the experience of a rape. This is something that she and her soul need for their growth. We do a channeling session with Jesus in which I ask him, are there dimensions, her name is Beverly, I ask, are there dimensions in which Beverly did not experience the rape? And he says, yes, that is true. And I say, how many Beverlys are there? And his answer is very interesting. He says, about 4. And I say, well, you know, how can it be about 4? It should be a discrete number. And he uses an analogy of a tree. And he says, the tree is like the soul, and as it grows, it sprouts a limb and another limb and another limb. The limbs are the personalities. Well, the limbs come and go. They grow and they die. They fade and they bloom. And so he explains that, and it's really a little bit beyond human comprehension, but in the parallel dimensions, there are parallel personalities that are like the limbs of the tree, coming and going, coming and going. And it's all designed so that the soul experiences the entirety of whatever it is that it's trying to learn.
Muchas veces consideramos que somos pequeños, casi insignificantes, pero nuestras vidas, en un sentido cósmico, tienen más repercusión de la que en principio creemos, ¿no? ¿Podrías explicar esto, lo importantes que somos y la repercusión que tiene nuestras experiencias en el conjunto de la existencia?
I think the best way for me to answer your question is to talk about the first story in El Plan de tu Alma. The first chapter is about the pre-birth planning of physical illness. And the very first story is about a man who plans prior to birth to have the AIDS virus. And he does this for a number of reasons. We actually go, with the medium, we go into his pre-birth planning session and we hear the conversation he has with the other souls who are going to be in his life when they're talking about planning his experience of the AIDS virus. Some of it is done because he wanted to learn compassion. Some of the motivation is that he's coming in as our teacher. He's giving us the opportunity to put aside our judgments about AIDS and open our hearts and feel more love and compassion to people who have AIDS. But one of the interesting things, to answer your question, is that we talked to an angel in the channeling session, and the angel tells us that everything that he is experiencing is being fed back to his soul group. Now, what is a soul group? A soul group is a collection of souls who are at the same stage of evolution, in other words, the same frequency or vibration. And they reincarnate with each other repeatedly, playing every conceivable role for each other. So you and the members of your soul group will be father and son, mother and daughter, husband and wife, brother and sister, best of friends, enemies, maybe even murderer and the one who is murdered. You play all these different roles for each other to help each other learn and grow. The angel tells us, that the man's name is John, that everything John experiences about AIDS and everything else in his life, the emotions, the thoughts, the growth that results, all of this is fed back to all the other members of the soul group. So he's not just having this experience in isolation for his own growth. He is allowing every single member of his soul group to grow through him. So everything that you do in your life, everything that you experience, that you see, that you say, every action that you take, every thought and emotion that you think and feel, all of this is tremendously important because your soul group can experience Earth through you and they evolve as you evolve.
Solo nuestro grupo de almas o incluso más allá, habida cuenta de la cantidad de seres que están implicados en nuestro viaje en este mundo, ¿no? Están los seres con los que planificamos nuestra vida aquí, están también los seres o guías que nos acompañan a lo largo de esta vida. Por lo tanto, hay muchos seres que se toman muchas molestias para que nosotros estemos aquí y desarrollemos nuestro proceso vital, ¿no? Por lo tanto, ¿cuál es, incluso más allá del grupo de almas, el alcance de nuestra experiencia?
I think that's true. I mean, one of the things I saw in the research for El Plan de tu Alma and El Don de tu Alma, you know, when we go into people's pre-birth planning sessions and we listen to the conversations they're going to have with their future friends, family members, all the significant people in their lives, a lot of the conversation is with their spirit guides. And the guides are advising them, you probably should try this experience, maybe you should probably not try that one. This would be a good thing to do, but let's modify it in this way or that way so that it's more manageable for you. So it's very much an exercise in love and wisdom for the spirit guides, and they are evolving and learning and growing through the experience as well. You know, I'll share another story. In El Plan de tu Alma, there's a chapter about the pre-birth planning of deafness and blindness. And the deafness story is a very touching story of a young woman, an American woman, who was 24 at the time I interview her. Her name is Penelope. She's African-American woman. And she was born completely deaf in both ears. We went into her pre-birth planning session. We listened to the conversation she had with her spirit guide when they planned the deafness. And what we found was that in the lifetime immediately previous to this one, she had the same mother she has in this lifetime. And in that past life, when she was a little girl, she heard her mother shot to death by the mother's boyfriend. Now, she didn't actually witness the murder, but she heard the gunshots that led to her mother's death. As you can imagine, she was quite traumatized by that, and in fact, it actually led her to commit suicide later in that lifetime. So Penelope returned to spirit from that life with what you could call an energy of unhealed trauma, which now needs to be healed. The discussion with her spirit guide in the pre-birth planning session shows how much the guide cares for her and loves her and wants to help her design a lifetime that will allow her to heal these unhealed energies. So the guide says to her, my dear, would you prefer to be born deaf so that no similar trauma will happen to you again and so that you can complete your healing from the last lifetime? And Penelope responds, yes, that is what I want and what I wish to do. And then what follows is a fascinating dialogue in which she and her spirit guide work out the details of her deafness. So as the guide is helping her to put into place and to design this very complex and very powerful life challenge of deafness, the guide is, through her experience of the deafness, the guide is evolving as well and ascending to a higher frequency, a higher level of vibration. This is why, as I understand it, there are different levels of guides. You know, it isn't just one classification. There are sort of junior guides and what you could call more senior guides. And then there are many beings who are more evolved than the spirit guides, ascended masters and so forth. And the way that a being ascends in vibration is through service. So what the spirit guides are doing in the pre-birth planning sessions is a form of service, and this is their path to evolution.
Cuentas el caso de almas de personalidades que incluso acceden a hacer daño a otras almas personalidades en este mundo en favor de su crecimiento. Esto es muy curioso porque arroja toda una nueva mirada sobre lo que podrían considerarse malas acciones, incluso sobre el karma que puede merecer una persona que ha hecho una mala acción, pero la ha hecho en el fondo para beneficiar a esa otra alma. Entonces, ¿cómo se redefine el concepto de la mala acción o del karma en este contexto?
It is confusing, and that's an area that I need to do more research in to fully understand myself. But I do ask about this in El Donde Tu Alma. It's either in the chapter on incest or rape, I can't recall which now, but we're doing a channeling session with Jesus, and I ask him, the person who created the harm, who took the negative action, is there going to be karma in this case? And he says, yes, there still is karma. Now, I don't yet fully understand why there would be karma. If it's part of an agreed upon pre-birth plan, that's something that I still need to research. But the understanding that Jesus conveys to us is that there is still karma in that case. And we also talk with Jesus about how we as a society should respond to people who harm others, because it raises the question, if it's all agreed upon, if it's all part of a plan, then why have laws? Why have prisons? Why punish anyone for doing anything? And Jesus says, no, at the level of the human being, at the level of the personality, it's still important to have these things. Even if it is part of a pre-birth plan, the plan itself includes the fact that you would be breaking a law. You would know that you were going to be punished for it. You would know that perhaps there was going to be a prison sentence involved. That portion of it is also part of a pre-birth plan. So he says the way that your society is responding to it is appropriate given your level of consciousness.